Hi, this is Sheldon Lettich, and I'm having a great time here with Zach and Dustin on $2 late fee. We've talked about Bloodsport, Lionheart, Double Impact, the entire list. Thank you for listening to the show, folks.
We're here to talk about your book.
Okay, yeah, let's talk
I bought a
about
copy.
that.
I love it. From Vietnam to Van Damme.
You read the whole book?
Did not read the entire book.
You just
All
read
right.
from Van Damme to Van Damme,
Yeah.
not the
Okay.
Vietnam part.
Well, the reason it's got that title, because that's pretty much encapsulates my adult life. Okay, when I turned 18, I joined the Marine Corps. I turned 19 over in Vietnam, so I was in Vietnam for a year. And then once I got back, and once I started getting involved with screenwriting, a lot of my material had to do with Vietnam. So that was my starting point. They say, write what you know. Well, I knew about the Marines in Vietnam, so I was writing about that. And then my career kind of, then it picked up speed when I met Jean-Claude through Bloodsport, because I wrote the original draft of Bloodsport. So ended up meeting Jean-Claude when he came back to LA from Hong Kong. And then that became a good portion of my adult life too, was writing and directing Van Damme movies. I believe I have directed more Van Damme movies than anybody else. I directed 4 of them. And I've been involved with the writing on about a dozen of them. My name's not in every one of those credits for various reasons, but
Yeah,
I got quite a few writing credits on Van Damme movies. Bloodsport and Double Impact, Lionheart, The Order. So yeah, I'm the a few of these interviews and articles have called me the man behind Van Damme, and I don't know if that's accurate, but it's accurate to a degree, because, or he's the man behind me, okay, because we've done so much stuff together.
yeah, he's the man behind you. Well, I don't know. We haven't had Van Damme on yet,
Right.
but you skirted over the fact that your path to Hollywood was really interesting. From being in the military, being in Vietnam, which is a story in itself.
Right.
To writing, making your first short film. I believe, was it Brian
Thompson's in it. Frank Dux is in it. The real Frank Dux is in it. And we had Philip Rhee and Simon Rhee. So it's a pretty cool little 20-minute movie. We're going to be premiering it on YouTube.
It's called Firefight, right?
It's called Firefight. And there's a YouTube site called Viking Samurai. And he's done a number of interviews with me and with Frank Dux and a lot of other people. And I'm giving him the opportunity to premiere it because we've gotten to be good buddies via YouTube. Now, we finished, I finished the movie 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And I did hand out VHS copies to everybody who worked on the movie, and I had a VHS copy myself. And on VHS, it really took away from the scope of the film.
Yeah,
you guys remember what VHS used to look like back in the video days?
Vaguely.
I mean, our podcast is called $2 late fee, so we've got.
Oh, you guys know all about it, okay?
Yeah.
So so it wasn't looking great, so I didn't really want to put it on YouTube or do anything else with it. I have it. I shot the movie in 16 millimeter film, and we blew it up to 35 millimeter. Looked spectacular on a big screen. Did sound effects, music, everything. But VHS just downgraded it so much that I didn't want to put that on YouTube and have that be the only version of it that people could see.
Yeah.
So about a year ago, I had the opportunity to digitize it in 2K at one of the really good labs here in LA called PhotoChem. So I made a 2K digital version of it. And that's what we're putting up there. And it looks really good. The 2K version looks really good. The sound is really good. So we're going to be premiering it. I think March 2nd, we're going to have it, and you'll be able to see that one.
Okay.
Right. So it's a little hidden gem from the early 80s. Yeah, and it's just an interesting relic from that period, just because of the cast, because we got Frank Dux, and it really led to the creation of Bloodsport, because I was hanging out with Frank a lot back then, and he's telling me all these tales about the Kumite, and showed me the article in Black Belt magazine, Kumite, a learning experience. So the editor of Black Belt was endorsing his story at the time.
Right.
And then when I was editing the film, I was editing it at probably the most low budget post-production facility in town. It was called Movie Tech. And next door to me, there was a guy named Ruben Mazzini who was cutting porno movies, okay, for Mark Dacascos.
Yeah.
And so I told Ruben, yeah, so I'm a screenwriter, and hey, this is my little movie here. And he came in and he looked at the movie. And I think right around that time, I had gotten hired by Stallone to co-write Rambo III. So he says, well, I got to introduce you to this producer friend of mine. And so Mark Dacascos invited me to lunch. So I had lunch with Mark Dacascos, and he told me he was considering making a martial arts movie. What he said to me was, movie genres run in cycles, and there hasn't been a good martial arts movie for a while. There were some Chuck Norris movies and Michael Dudikoff movies there a little further back, but there hasn't been a martial arts movie. There's different, there's science fiction, there's war movies, there's all kinds of genres. So, martial arts is missing right now. So I've got an idea for a martial arts movie, and I want to talk to you about writing it. And the movie is called Kickboxer. So he pitched Kickboxer to me, and this was an early version of Kickboxer, and I really didn't like the premise all that much. And I said, well, look, Mark, if you want to do a martial arts movie, I got an idea. It's not written down yet, but it's called Bloodsport. Well, wow, he just lit up immediately. Like, that's a great title for a martial arts movie. And well, it's about this secret underground martial arts tournament, which is no holds barred. And I know this guy named Frank Dux, who claims that he was a participant, and who claims that he actually won. He won the heavyweight title for the Kumite. I can introduce you to this guy. He lives right here in LA. He's a friend of mine. So I set up a meeting with Mark Dacascos and Frank Dux. Frank repeated the story about the Kumite, and yeah, I'm the world champion, and I got a trophy and all this. And Mark's liking this, and I'm liking this. And so Mark hired me to write the screenplay for Bloodsport. And he paid Frank for the rights to his true life story. Okay.
Quote, unquote.
Well, yeah, quote, yeah, but basically Frank was saying, hey, this is all true. And
yeah.
You got the editor of Black Belt magazine endorsing this back then. There was no internet back then.
Right.
So I couldn't just do a quick search to see, is this guy full of shit? Was it really a Kumite? No, there's no way to check it out. So we bought into it. And it was a great story. Well, basically what I'm leading up to is that all of this came about because of working on this little movie Firefight. That's how I met Mark, and I was working with Frank, and so then we also gave a break to a few actors who went on to do lots of other stuff. Frank knew Philip Rhee and Simon Rhee, and so they're in the movie playing Viet Cong. It's this Vietnam movie.
Wow.
And and there's a nice little fight between Frank Dux and Simon Rhee battling, and Frank's got an entrenching tool, a little shovel in his hand, and he's going after Simon Rhee. It's a cool little movie. It's got action, it's got music. A lot of people like the movie Cyborg, right?
Of course, yeah.
There's a lot of folks out there that really love the music for Cyborg, and the same guy wrote the score for Firefight. His name is
Kevin
Bassenson. we replaced the original composer. Albert Pune had used a different composer who wrote music that was just kind of science fiction-y, kind of weird, and just didn't suit a Jean-Claude Van Damme action movie. And so I brought Kevin in, and Kevin wrote a really kick-ass score that he did on all on synthesizers. And people are fans of that score. I read about it on Facebook and on some Van Damme fan sites. People just love that score. Anyway, he did Firefight for me also.
Well, that's one of the highlights of Cyborg, in my opinion, is the score. So
it is, yeah. Kevin did a great job, and he really didn't go on to doing much afterwards, which is a shame because he was very talented.
Yeah.
And the way I met him, he was the housemate of Alan J. Glickman, who's the writer who I wrote Russkies with. So Alan and I wrote Russkies.
Yep.
Okay, another early 80s masterpiece.
Love Russkies. I love
you
them.
Really? Oh, great.
Yeah.
You've seen it then.
Of course, I have it on DVD.
You own it, right? Yeah.
Really?
No VHS deck?
No, but it's not available on DVD or Blu-ray. But if you look deep enough on the internet, you can find sites that make
an illegal copy.
Sorry,
so
Sheldon.
Actually, it's available now. And the latest version that I've seen, if you look it up on Amazon, maybe it's the foreign version of Amazon that's got it. I think it's not the US version.
Okay.
Go to Amazon.de, which is the German version, and they've got Joaquin Phoenix's face basically dominating the cover.
Oh, wow.
That was his first. That was his first leading role. He was he went by the name Leaf Phoenix.
Yes.
Yep.
And
he was in a handful of movies as Leaf, like Parenthood, for example, was another one. Yep.
Right. Yeah. He was just a very talented kid from the outset. But who could have predicted he'd be an Oscar winner 20 years later? Oh, huh? Although I wouldn't have been surprised. No, absolutely not. We just knew he was good, but we had no idea that he would really go the distance and win, Best Actor Oscar. So
that film has a really nice cast. Peter Billingsley's in it. Whip Hubley, obviously from Top Gun, and Whip's been in a bunch of great movies.
Right, And the singer Carole King is in it.
Yeah,
that's an oddball one, but
that's
Carole
awesome.
King, who basically produced the album Tapestry.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, this generation won't know who Carole King is, just like they don't know who Bonnie Raitt is apparently.
Right.
But she's a legend. So
right. So pretty. It's an impressive little movie, and it also has a guy named Vojo Goric, and Vojo I used in Lionheart, and Vojo's also in Rambo. He's in the second Rambo movie, First Blood Part 2, playing one of the Russians. He's got a fight with Stallone on a helicopter that's in flight. And they got a brutal fight. Apparently Vojo, we used Vojo again in Lionheart. Vojo is one of the two Legionnaires that's chasing after Van Damme. So he's in Russkies also.
Nice.
Playing one of the Russians. So a lot of connecting a lot of dots there.
That's so amazing. Did you do Firefight as a short to make it be a calling card to get more directing? Was that the idea, as opposed to a feature?
Yeah, it was. Well, it started out, I co-authored a play called Tracers, which is about the Vietnam War. And the story, Firefight was one scene in Tracers, one short scene, part of a number of scenes that dealt with various aspects of the war. And it was too big to put on the stage because it had helicopters, it had battle scenes, it really needed all that stuff. And so the director decided, okay, we're not going to use this one, so you can have it, you can do whatever you want with it. And I really liked that scene. I thought it had some great possibilities, and I wanted people to see it and hear it. So I just decided, this is after I went to American Film Institute, so I knew a little bit about directing and cinematography and all of that.
Nice.
So I just wanted to tell the story, but I also thought, it would be a good little calling card for me if I wanted to direct a movie. And it was a good calling card for the actors also, like Frank Dux. That's he thought he was movie star material at the time, and so
Sure he did.
yeah. So I said, "Hey Frank, you want to be in? Let's do this little movie, and I'll put you in one of the lead roles." So that's how I got Frank Dux in there, and Brian Thompson. It was his very first movie role ever. We had an advertisement, and there was this newspaper that would come out once a week that would have casting calls in it,
Like backstage or
something like that. I forgot the name of it now. Well, read the book; it's in there. Okay,
It's in the book. It is in the book. I don't want to give away too much details.
Yeah, don't give away, Zach, what the
Okay.
casting.
All right.
Don't.
Yeah. If they hear it all here, they're not going to buy the book, you know.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
okay. So, anyways, we'll be judicious in what we say. But yeah, Brian saw an ad, and he came in and auditioned, and I picked him for the movie, and he's really good. And the next thing I know, he's telling me, "Yeah, I got cast in this science fiction movie. It's called The Terminator." And the director really seems to have his shit together. Very competent, very smart guy. So yeah, I mean, and he's one of the, I think he's the Terminator's very first victim.
He is, along with Bill Paxton, I believe.
Yeah. Basically, the Terminator reaches into his chest and pulls out his heart, if I'm not mistaken. That's Brian. And then Brian got cast in Cobra.
Yep.
Yes.
So
one of the creepiest villains of all time, in my
gosh.
opinion. One of the creepiest. I had night terrors because of him.
Right, he's called the Night Stalker, the Night something.
Yep.
And he gets dispatched by Stallone on a meat hook.
Yes.
Puts him up on a meat hook. Yeah, Brian's been dispatched by every major action star.
By the way, great impression of him. That was very spot on. And I was going to say he was in a movie called Miracle Mile that came out in the 80s, and he definitely goes against type in Miracle Mile. And if anyone's interested, it's a really great performance by him in a quirky, fun cult movie.
Right. I don't think I've seen Miracle Mile, but I heard about it. I know he plays in one of the movies. Maybe he plays like a transvestite serial killer or something.
Yeah, not in Miracle Mile, but yes.
No, not okay, but yeah, Brian's gone many different directions, and he's in Three Amigos. Well,
you had him in Lionheart as well.
Yeah, Lionheart and The Order. I made a movie in Israel,
right?
The Order, with Van Damme, and Brian's in that. And I used him in a movie called Perfect Target, which we shot in Mexico. So
yes, with Daniel
Bernhardt.
Yes.
Yeah, we had Robert Englund was in that one too.
Yeah, Robert Englund. Yeah.
Right. So that's a very obscure one. It's very hard to get a hold of, but it's this little. It's kind of a big little movie. The budget was very low.
Really is.
Have you guys seen it?
I have. I saw it many years ago.
Okay. Well, what interesting detail about that? My fight choreographer was Chad Stahelski, and Chad has gone on to direct all the John Wick movies. Okay?
We just talked about him with David Patrick Kelly.
Right. And David Leitch was there as a stuntman. It was David Leitch's very first movie that he ever worked on. Chad brought him along. So we had Chad and David both working on that movie.
Oh, amazing.
And we've got some awesome action scenes in it. Yeah, it's a really obscure one. I think it's available on DVD. You could probably find it on Amazon. But yeah, Brian's in that one too, playing a baddie. He's always playing some kind of a baddie. And so that was his debut was Firefight.
That's pretty awesome. And David Leitch, of course, big time director now, just did Bullet Train.
David's gotten to be huge. And David was, I worked with David on The Order, this movie I made in Israel with Van Damme. And David was Jean-Claude's stunt double.
So it'll be out.
We've got the special edition. There's a special edition Blu-ray of Bloodsport coming out, I think in April. So that's going to be really cool.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, there's a lot of special features on it. They have an interview with Jean-Claude. They have an interview with me, and quite a few other nice features that I've heard about. I haven't seen them yet. So yeah, so finally, people have been asking for a Bloodsport Blu-ray.
Breaking news.
Yeah, it's coming out in Germany first. It's going to be Region B in Germany.
Okay.
But they made a 4K transfer, and I'm sure it's going to look awesome. And yeah, so I think April is when it comes out. But even so, you guys might talk about it ahead of time on your martial arts week or month.
Martial Arts Madness.
Martial Arts Madness. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that next to Jean-Claude Van Damme, you are kind of the face of Bloodsport in many ways, as far as the presence on social media and whatnot. When people talk about Bloodsport, they say Sheldon Lettich, has had such a huge hand in this. And reading your book, I was really fascinated by that, because I'm more naive to the business than Dustin. And I are both voice actors, and we've been in the business for a while, but I'm more naive to it than he is. And it always fascinates me when someone comes in to write a screenplay, or the story editor, or someone does polishing on a script. All of that is foreign to me. So you had you were very hands-on with making sure this movie kind of came out to begin with, right? Because the Canon was not too high on it at first.
Oh, right. Yeah. I talk about that at length in the book. Menachem Golan was the guy who ran the company. It was Golan and Globus, his cousin, Yoram Globus.
The Go-Go Boys.
The Go-Go Boys, absolutely. The Bad News Jews. That's what we like to call them also. I like that one even better.
That's perfect.
Same.
They had made a movie with Leon Isaac Kennedy.
Yes, Penitentiary.
Penitentiary, right. So they had made Penitentiary 2 with Leon.
And Ernie Hudson in an early role, by the way.
Oh, is Ernie in that? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. And that was, and then Leon did Lone Wolf McQuade with Chuck Norris and David Carradine. And he wanted to do a sequel to Lone Wolf McQuade. So he hired me to write what would be a sequel to Lone Wolf McQuade. We called it Stryker's Force. And he couldn't get Chuck interested in doing the sequel. So now we had a different title. We had Stryker's Force. And Leon, I introduced him to Van Damme early on, before Bloodsport came out, before Van Damme became a big deal at all. And they hit it off really well. And I said to Leon, hey, what if we do Stryker's Force with Van Damme instead of Chuck Norris? Like the two of you have both got deals at Canon Films, because Leon had done he'd done Penitentiary 2 with them, and I think he had a deal for another movie. And Jean-Claude had shot Bloodsport, but it wasn't out yet. But he had a 3-picture deal with Menachem also. So it just made sense. Hey, let's take this into Menachem and get this movie made with you and Jean-Claude Van Damme. So we took that to Canon Films. Now, Menachem saw my little film, Firefight. So Firefight really did a lot to get me my first few directing deals. In fact,
sure sounds like it.
Yeah, like with Lionheart. Jean-Claude wanted me to direct Lionheart. I'd written the script. And this producer, Sunil Shah, wanted to use Eric Carson, who had directed a couple of other movies. I think he directed Good Guys Wear Black and Angel Town with Olivier Gruner. So he wanted Eric to direct the film. He didn't feel comfortable with me because I'd not directed a feature yet. Jean-Claude begged him and said, look, take a look at Sheldon's movie, Firefight. Well, that convinced Sunil. So that's how I ended up directing Lionheart.
Yeah.
And that's how we also convinced Menachem that I could direct this movie, Stryker's Force. So anyways, we go into Menachem's office to have a meeting about this. And he says, look, I want to make the movie. I like the script. I like you, Leon. I like Sheldon. Van Damme? No, we're not using Van Damme. Well, Menachem, you've got a 3-picture deal with him. No, Van Damme, Menachem's word for him was poison. He's poison. He's never going to be a movie star.
Wow.
So he wanted me to make the movie with Michael Dudikoff.
Who was a big star at the time.
Who was, and that's what Menachem said. Michael Dudikoff is a movie star. I'm quoting him verbatim. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, Menachem didn't like Bloodsport, and the first cut of Bloodsport really was not good. It had a lot of problems. They had an editor at Canon who came in and restructured the movie and fixed the whole movie up and really made it work. But Van Damme, no, we're not using Van Damme. And he didn't even want to release Bloodsport in theaters. Part of the discussion that day was, we're going straight to video with Bloodsport.
Wow.
This is back in, we're talking like early 80s, like nothing went straight to video unless it was a total piece of shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Menachem felt Bloodsport's terrible, poison. I told him to his face, okay, their big film that year was going to be Missing in Action 3. It was Braddock. Missing in Action 3.
Yep.
So basically they were trying to emulate what had been done with Rambo.
Yep.
You know, so instead of just Missing in Action 3, we're going to call it Braddock Missing in Action 3. And that's going to be that's our big movie. And I said, Menachem, if you release Bloodsport in theaters, it's going to make more money than Missing in Action 3. And
no doubt.
You're dreaming, my friend. Okay. And it did. Okay. It actually did. When they finally opened it, what they decided to do was that Sami Hadida in France convinced Menachem that he needs to do something with this movie. Sami had released No Retreat, No Surrender in France. Sami was a French distributor. And it was under the title Karate Tiger.
Yep.
He did really well with it. And so Sami had heard about Bloodsport, and he heard that Menachem wanted to go straight to video with it. And Sami tells Menachem, look, if you're going to go straight to video, sell me the movie. I will release it in theaters in France. Okay. So this started Menachem and Yoram thinking that, well, maybe we need to take a chance on this movie.
Right. And
so they opened it up on the West Coast of the United States. They opened it in California, Oregon, and Washington, just as a test to see how it did. And it did really well. So then they went nationwide with it. And it did well nationwide. And so they suddenly realized, hey, we got a star here on our hands with this Van Damme guy. And so they ended up fulfilling the other obligations that Jean-Claude had, because they were just going to throw the contract away. And then they decided, okay, since Bloodsport did well, all right, let's give them a couple more chances. So they did Cyborg and they did Death Warrant, and they did well with those also.
They did, but Cyborg could have been a kiss of death for Van Damme.
Yes. If you, I have a whole chapter.
You do
in my book called Saving Cyborg, and I don't know if I guess this is a story I won't repeat here because it's a long story. But basically, you can read about it in the book. That movie was the original cut, Albert Pune's cut, and I have nothing against Albert Pune. He's a good director, but Cyborg was a mess. It was just a complete mess.
Yeah.
And they did a test screening. Jean-Claude was in Thailand finishing up Kickboxer. And I'd heard through the grapevine at Canon, because I was hanging out at Canon a lot back then, that they were doing a test screening. So I'm talking to Jean-Claude in Thailand. Hey, Jean-Claude, they're going to do a test screening of Cyborg. Oh, you got to get in there. You got to sneak in and tell me how it is. Okay, so I did that. I had no problem getting in because they all knew me there. So I snuck into the test screening, and there were 100 people that they had recruited off the street, I guess. And
oh boy.
So I'm watching the movie, and you start getting little bits and pieces of laughter here and there.
Yeah.
And it's not a comedy, to be clear.
It's not a comedy.
They shouldn't be laughing.
It's
Yeah,
post-apocalyptic drama.
It's supposed to be this. It's this, bloody, futuristic action movie. Sort of in the vein of Mad Max and Road Warrior, and the laughter keeps increasing. And finally, when we get to the final fight, the big final showdown between Jean-Claude and Fender, the villain.
Yes.
It was played by a surfing champion from Hawaii named Vince Klein.
Yeah, he's in Point Break.
Right. Well, the audience they were in hysterics. It was like we were watching some Eddie Murphy movie or something. They were in hysterics.
Yeah. Oh boy.
And then they hand out the survey cards after the movie's over.
Oh, no.
People fill out the survey cards.
Oh boy.
And out of 100 people that were there was one person who liked the movie, and everybody else disliked the movie.
Oh.
I realized, oh shit, this is a disaster.
Yeah.
And they already had the movie booked into theaters. They already had posters. The posters were made. And I called Jean-Claude and I said, dude, you got to get back here right away. And he just finished shooting Kickboxer, and he was going to take a break in, I think, Phuket. Anyways, he was going to chill out for a few days. And I told him, you've got to get on a plane right away. You got to come back here. You got to come back. Look, don't take my word for it. But there was only one person in the audience that liked the movie. People were laughing at the final fight. This is not good. He got on the next plane out. Yeah. Next day, he's back in LA, goes right to Canon Films and says, I want to see the movie. And they put it up on a flatbed editing machine. And he watched the movie. And when he came out, I did not sit in there with him to watch it again. When he came out, his face was white. And he just went right to Menachem and Yoram and said, guys, you can't release this movie. You've got to give me this. I'm going to recut the movie myself. I'm giving away the whole chapter, but it's okay. It's better when you hear it.
No, because it's much, yeah. This is the Cliff Notes version.
Right, yeah. So Canon was a notoriously cheap company.
No.
Yeah, you've heard the rumors. So
yeah.
True. He convinced them. He said, guys, I'm going to pay for it myself. Okay. But they said, okay, we'll give you a couple months to recut the movie. And the movie, we're not talking digital back then. This is a 35 millimeter film. Every splice is held together with a piece of tape. Okay. So we got a few editors. So we had 2 editing rooms. I was in one, Jean-Claude was in the other. I took all the dialogue stuff, and Jean-Claude took all the action stuff, and we recut. We came up with new dialogue. I had to. I went in and I did ADR with the actors and replaced almost every line in the movie.
Oh my God!
And we recut it so that if Jean-Claude's on camera saying something, we would use the over-the-shoulder shot instead, so that we could slip dialogue into his mouth without it being out of sync. And then I realized what the big problem was with the villain, why the audience was laughing. He's this big, scary-looking dude, but he had kind of a high, effeminate voice, okay, which just sounded ridiculous.
For such an imposing character, yeah.
Yeah, and that was getting the audience laughing because the voice and the visage and the voice did not match at all. Not for what the movie was intended to be. So we ended up hiring an actor named Branscombe Richmond. People have heard, you know who Branscombe is?
Oh, we know Branscombe.
We do.
He's got the voice that you need for the villain.
Yeah, brother.
Okay, so we got Branscombe to redo every line, every grunt, every effort.
Oh my God.
And it worked great. Okay, you guys you've seen Cyborg, of course, and you wouldn't think that there's somebody else revoicing him, but we revoiced Vince Klein with Branscombe Richmond. And that had a lot to do with making the movie work better. So anyways, that's the whole, that's most of the
hilarious.
stories, more details in the book, but Jean-Claude and I pretty much we rode into the rescue. And then Albert used some weird spacey sci-fi music film. In fact, they didn't have time to change the posters. That's what you don't see Kevin Bassenson's name on the posters, because posters were already made. Canon wasn't gonna pay to redo them.
Yeah.
So somebody else gets the credit, but Kevin Bassenson, who did Firefight, did the entire score of Cyborg and did it very quickly on a synthesizer. And I thought the score was terrific, but I'm just surprised how, 35 years later, 40 years later, people love that score. They think that score is awesome. So
they do. In that film has a very strong cult following.
right.
I think, Dustin and I on our show, we try to find the silver linings in some of these films that maybe don't hit all of the marks as they should. I think Cyborg, and rest in peace to Albert Pune, who's had a tremendous career doing science fiction, horror, and all sorts of genre films.
Everything about the way he directed the film was terrific, but it's just the way that it was put together.
Yeah,
because he had a different vision. It's Jean-Claude Van Damme, and he was a rising star, a rising action star. But this movie was, I believe Albert was calling it like a rock and roll opera.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh.
And no, that's not going to it's Jean-Claude's career, nor is it going to be a successful action movie. So the music was rock and roll opera music, and so I completely replaced it with Kevin Bassenson's score, and that makes a big difference with those action scenes.
The score in films always, I feel, makes a huge.
Yes.
Actually, that's a piece to our show is we talk about the soundtracks to these movies as well and how important they are. We've had people like Vince DiCola on our show and talking about music scores and the importance of them. Bloodsport in particular has a tremendously fantastic score. Only the Strong, which you directed, has a great soundtrack and very timely for when it 1993, which we're talking about 30 years later, right? And it's very interesting that people, I think, often overlook the importance of a score or a soundtrack because it can really deflate the energy from a film.
Right. Now, I never do. I'm always right on top of the music. And actually, for Only the Strong, you're talking about the score being great, but actually the score was not very good. It was written, the producers got a jazz drummer named Harvey Mason to do the score. And Harvey had never scored a movie before. He was a jazz drummer for a group called Foreplay. And just coincidentally, because we just had the Grammy Awards, his son, Harvey Mason Jr., is like the president of the ASCAP now.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Harvey Mason Jr., I just saw his picture in the paper today. But the score was not good. Okay, what was great was the songs.
The songs, yes.
Yeah, right. And
the
Zoom,
songs,
Zoom, Zoom, which became
Yes.
became the trademark song for Mazda. And
that's right. Oh my gosh.
Zoom, zoom.
The all-new 220 horsepower Mazda 6.
Zoom, 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 yeah. And
Wow.
So that's what people remember. But I really had to enhance and downplay the score because the score was not good. And Harvey hasn't scored a movie since then. He's a great drummer, great jazz drummer, but he's not a film composer.
Yeah.
And so I basically jumped into that one with both feet, and I told the producers, I told Harvey, this is not working for me. And when we got into the editing room, I did a lot of work with that score. I basically took something from this piece and something from that piece and put them together. And if you listen to it, the score itself is not great. It's just the songs are fantastic.
Yes.
But not the score. And we even had to bring in somebody new to do the final fight. And the final fight's that's a big deal in an action movie like this. And the score Harvey wrote was just terrible, and we couldn't get him rehired to redo it. No, we found somebody else who redid the whole thing on synthesizers. And if you listen to it, you'll hear it's all synthesizer, but it works. We got it to work. The movie would have been even better, like if I would have had Kevin Bassenson do the score for it. Okay, I'm not talking about the songs. I'm talking about the score.
The score,
but Kevin really got it. He understood how to write music for an action film. When people say hey, the music was great and only strong, they're talking about
the songs. Yeah, and quite often that can be the factor that makes the film better is a certain song. You know, again, going back to Bloodsport, there's a marriage of score and songs, which is what makes it so great. But Only the Strong was that your last kind of interaction with Frank Dux as far as working with him?
Yeah, actually, we ended up, I don't want to get into a bunch of controversy here, but we ended up having to send Frank home. Okay.
Yeah, you can read about it in the book a little bit.
You can read about it in the book, but he was not being helpful at all. He knew nothing about capoeira, even though he claimed that he did.
Yeah.
And Mark Dacascos finally came to me and said, "Hey, Sheldon, Frank's just not helping me at all. In fact, he's making it harder to do these scenes." And really, Frank did not. The only action scene that he was involved with, where he was really hands-on, was the chop shop scene.
Yes,
and I actually put him in that. He's the guy with the welding helmet on, and there's a few cool moves there, but that was mostly gags with. That was like typical action movie stuff, with the chainsaw and all this kind of stuff. And Mark picks up a pole, he uses the pole, but the capoeira stuff, Frank was no help with that at all. But fortunately, Mark had been studying capoeira with a real Brazilian capoeira maestre named Amen Santos.
Right.
We had Amen on the film the entire time, and Amen was very helpful with those scenes because he knew the moves. So the fight scenes in that movie, quite honestly, it's Amen and our stunt coordinator, Artie Maleshi, who is like the top stunt coordinator in South Florida, Mark Dacascos himself, and my co-writer, Luis Esteban, who's a martial artist, the real martial artist. We got Luis helping also, so we had the writer helping, but Frank was not much help. So I'm not trying to disparage him, but quite honestly, I had to send him home early because he wasn't helping, and he was just getting up and just telling tales of the Kumite and tales of blowing up ammo depots in Nicaragua and stuff like that, all of which was made up. So
this is, I feel like we need to get into at this moment when you realize that Frank Dux was just totally full of shit. Like that must have been crazy, right? Like, because the everybody that hasn't seen Bloodsport, I mean, people that are listening to this, I assume you have, but Jean-Claude Van Damme plays Frank Dux. It's based on a true story, as you said. Right. When the movie ends, there's this card that comes up with all these stats, like fastest knockout, 3.2 seconds, fastest punch.
They were in Black Belt magazine, in that Black Belt magazine article. Right?
Yes, okay.
Frank was pushing those stats for a while, but those stats nobody's ever proven that those stats.
Oh my God!
Yeah, there's no proof that Frank ever participated in a competition anywhere. Okay, I never saw him fight. I knew him for a few years. I never saw him fight. I heard him talk about fighting, but I never saw him fight.
Yeah.
Then lately he's been disparaging Don the Dragon Wilson.
Yep. And he's a friend of the show.
Don's the real deal. You've got tons of footage of him fighting people and knocking people out.
Yeah.
And there's all these stats that have been written down. There's nothing like that about Frank. And so a few months back, I guess Don was doing an interview somewhere, and he said, look, all this, Frank Dux claiming he's had 300 fights and he's won 300 fights. It's nonsense, okay? 300 fights, that's a lot of fights. I've had 75 real fights myself. Okay, I'm a real champion. I've got proof. Frank's got no video of any of these fights. So it's just all made up. He made up all this stuff. Basically, it's like he was Tom Clancy saying, well, I really was in the CIA and I did all of the stuff that I write about in my books. No, Tom Clancy says, I'm an author. I did research. I'm writing these books. Frank could have done the same thing. He's got a good imagination, but instead, he was telling people that he really did this shit, that he really was in the CIA. He showed me a Medal of Honor. He told me he was telling people back then that he was a recipient of the Medal of Honor. Okay. He shows it to me one day, invites me over to his house, and there it is. There's a Medal of Honor draped over a piece of plexiglass. Oh, that's my Medal of Honor. Well, no. According to the military, he received no medals at all because he was never in combat. He was making up all this stuff. It's called stolen valor nowadays. Okay, the term didn't exist back then, but he was making up all these crazy stories about Vietnam and Nicaragua, and I'm not a bullshitter, so I don't bullshit people. I don't make up stories. Look, I was really in Vietnam. Got the documentation. I've got photos.
You've got the photos to prove it. So.
There it is. That's crazy.
That's my 19th birthday, actually, when that photo was taken.
Wow. And I got to say really quickly, you guys everyone listening can read this in your book. I think you do a very balanced way of calling out people for their bullshit.
Right.
But at the same time, not throwing them under the bus, which you could have easily done, but I think you do it in a very tasteful way.
I insulted one person, okay, and that was Peter McDonald, who got me kicked off of Legionnaire so that he could take my place. And I talk about it in the book too, because he did the exact same thing to Russell Mulcahy. And Russell's a really good director.
Highlander, for example.
And Russell was the original director of Rambo III. Well, Peter undermined him and got Russell fired, and then he took over Rambo 3. He did a good job on Rambo 3. Okay, I won't disparage that, but he was in a very underhanded way that was just trying to destroy somebody else's reputation. So the only insult in the book is me talking about Peter McDonald. I didn't think I had to soft pedal my opinion about Peter McDonald, but I'm pretty nice to Frank in the book.
You are.
Yeah,
you are. Everybody go out and get Sheldon's book. And Sheldon, thank you for coming on our show.
You're very welcome. All right, guys.
Inside you, that's where the strength begins.